people who actually run the government. Not the shadow government in the deep state that's pulling the strings today. Right now, if there's one thing I get done as your next U.S. president, one war that I will wage, it's not some pointless foreign war abroad. It is a war on our own shadow government here in the United States of America. You actually want to drain the swamp, and I give my predecessor Donald Trump immense credit for exposing the problem. But exposing the problem is just the first step. You actually want to drain the swamp. Here's how we're going to do it. Fire 75% of the federal bureaucrats. I'll do that starting on day one. Shut down government agencies that shouldn't exist. FBI, ATF, CDC, U.S. Department of Education. We're not just going to massage them and reform them and put Betsy DeVos on top here and maybe they'll fire some Christopher Wray for some appeasement of the people over here so you get James Comey 2.0, build him a nice new building. None of that. We're going to get in there and shut it down. That's how you actually get serious about gutting the deep state. If I can't work for you for more than 8 years as your next president, which is a good thing, neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. For the few that are left, the 25% that are left, 8-year term limits for the bureaucrats instead of civil service protections. This is how you drain the swamp. Do not start with last year's budget as the baseline, which is based on the prior year's budget, which is based on the year before's budget, all of which is broken, and that's how you get a $34 trillion national debt problem. No, we will start with 0 as our baseline and ask what's actually necessary. Zero-based budgeting. That's how I've run my businesses, and that's how I'm going to run the federal government of the United States. It's not too much to ask. The people we elect to run the government are once again the ones who actually run the government. And then number 2 is this. The moral duty that they owe, that we owe, that I will owe as your elected president will be to the citizens of this country, not any other one. America First doesn't come with an asterisk. We're not going to send $200 billion of our own money so that some Ukrainian kleptocrat can buy a bigger house as we increase the risk of World War III in the process. No, as your next president on day one, as your next commander-in-chief, I will move our own troops to protect our own borders in this country, southern border and northern border too. That is how you protect this nation and stand for the rule of law in the United States. I will end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal migrants to this country. It doesn't apply to them. And I swear an oath to the Constitution, that's what the 14th Amendment already says. January 20th, 2025, going forward, a year from now, going forward, no child born of illegals in this country will enjoy citizenship. And I can't understand why the rest of the Republican Party has such a tough time saying so. We won't use our money, your money, to pay cities, sanctuary cities, to pay for the breakage of the rule of law. We're going to end federal aid using our money to places like Central America and Mexico when those countries aren't even protecting against their borders between Venezuela and the southern border of Texas. We'll force them to do it. Not just build the wall, use the military to secure our own border. My foreign policy is clear. I'm going to avoid World War III. I'm going to declare economic independence from communist China. We can't depend on our enemy for our pharmaceuticals and our military equipment as we are today. And then here's the most radical one of all. I'm going to use our own national defense spending to actually defend our own homeland. The fact that that's radical says a lot about where we are as a country. And so I just want to make cyber attacks, super EMP attacks, all of this. Anybody here heard the term EMP? Does that mean anything to anyone? Good. We can talk about it more. It refers to the use of electromagnetic pulse attacks that could take out our electric grid, which if it happens, half this country could die in a matter of a year. That's the hard truth. And we're as more vulnerable to that as we've ever been. Where's our foreign policy establishment there? And by the way, we talk about missile attacks. I could go straight down the list. Our homeland's more vulnerable than it's ever been. But at the most basic level, if you had 3 million Chinese coming over from the west border, or you had 3 million Iranians coming over from the eastern border, we'd call that what it is. It's an invasion. Forget super EMP even. We have an invasion of our own country right now at our own southern border. And yet we've somehow tied ourselves into a knot saying that we can't actually use our own law enforcement or our own military to protect against it. That ends on my watch. And think about the things I'm telling you. Two basic ideas. This shouldn't be too much to ask. The people we elect to run the government are the ones who run the government, not the unelected bureaucrats. And that those elected representatives owe a duty to the citizens of this country, not another one. That's not controversial. That's common sense. That's not a Democratic idea or a Republican idea or a black idea or a white idea. These are American ideals that we fought a revolution to secure in this country. And yes, I believe those ideals still exist. I think we live in a 1776 moment right now. It's 1776 in the year 2024. That's where we are. And so I know it's on one hand, you look at the way in which we've been perverted into a country where the two things I just told you are so controversial that the mainstream media, CNN on down, can't tolerate it. That's where we are. On the other hand, we think of our founding fathers. They had it much worse. They had King George, which CNN is, in mainstream media, they're approaching, but it's not King George level, right? And so the positive side of this is that what a special time that would have been to be alive in the spring of 1776. What would George Washington say if he were alive right now? He would say that, you know what? You guys have another 250 years still left in you. We have another 250 years and then some still left. But you're going to have to step up and seize it. It doesn't come to you automatically. It didn't come to us automatically in 1776. And it's not going to come automatically right now. You got to step up and do your part. They say the caucus night's going to be cold on January 15th, on Monday night. Well, you know what? It was probably pretty cold when George Washington crossed the Delaware. So we don't have a lot of patience for the excuses we're going to make to save this country. But we're going to have to step up and seize that moment ourselves. I'm glad we have young people here. Thomas Jefferson, who signed that Declaration of Independence that led to that American Revolution that eventually culminated in George Washington crossing that Delaware. He was 33 years old when he wrote that Declaration of Independence, believe it or not. And he invented the swivel chair while he was at it. Right, that was the spirit of our founding fathers. Right? So the left, we got victimhood culture running left and right. Race and gender and sexuality. Forget that. You're not some identity, riding some tectonic plate of group identity politics. That's what I tell the left, but I'm telling us right here. It's easy to preach to the other side, and we do that, and it's important to do that. But I'm in this race to speak the truth, not just to the other side, but to our own side right here in the Republican Party. We can't be a bunch of victims either, sitting here victimized by what they're doing to us. No, we're not going to be victims. We're going to be victorious. Okay, when I get in be the U.S. president, to lead you all for 8 years, first thing I'm doing in the first year is elections we can trust and believe in. Single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday, paper ballots, government-issued ID to match the voter file, and English as the national language on the ballot. That's not too much to ask. That's common sense. We fought a revolution to be able to elect our leaders. Darn well, let us do it, for God's sake. But in order to get there, we have a little bit of a circular loop there, a little bit of how we're going to do that this time. This has to be a moral mandate. This has to be what Reagan did in 1980. This can't be another little 50.1 MSNBC trotting out the winner the Tuesday after the election. That doesn't work. This has to be Reagan 1980 style mandate. And a landslide minus some shenanigans is still a win. That's what we need in this country. That's what I need to be able to reunite this country. And I'm going to ask you to open your eyes to what I see happening in plain sight. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, actually. They're leading us into a trap right now. That's what's happening. If you think these people, this system, will let Donald J. Trump get anywhere near that White House again, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. These people will stop at nothing, and I'm increasingly certain when I say nothing, to keep this man away from power. They're selling us now the rope today that they're going to use to hang us tomorrow. So they want it to go that direction. Narrow this down to Donald Trump and a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet they can control. So a little step in the plot play out a couple hours ago. Chris Christie's apparently dropping out. Yeah, whatever. Who cares about that? But it's just one step. You got to open your eyes. It's part of a bigger. You know what's going to happen? So, I've talked about this for a long time, and now this is long before the removal of Trump from the ballot. And it goes to the heart of why I'm in this race, and I have to be the person who wins this Iowa caucus and have to lead this country forward. Just one tiny little speck Next up, Ron DeSantis is going to become Nikki Haley's vice president. You mark my words, that's happening next. Ron DeSantis may not know it. It's not as though he has a choice in the matter. This is a system that runs far deeper, and it has made a choice. We cannot fall for the trap they have laid. Our America First movement did not begin in 2016. It began in 1776. And we owe it to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers to make sure we do have another 250 years and then some still left. Many of you may be undecided. I'm assuming that, Iowa, the beauty of this is many people wait till the last day, and you should, because it's an important decision on your shoulders. But next Monday night, you have an important decision to make. And I'm asking you to not only bring yourselves to the caucus, and I'm asking you for your vote that night. I'm asking you to bring 10 people who aren't in this room out too, and tell them what we talked about and bring them too. But I'm asking you to open your eyes, especially for those of you who are thinking of supporting the man I respect in this race, other than our candidacy here. The person I respect the most is Donald Trump. We love the man because he got this fight started. But now it is our job to finish it. We owe it to this country. Our America First agenda is bigger than one man. It does not belong to Donald Trump, just as it does not belong to me. It belongs to you, to us, to we the people in this country. So I'm asking you to open your eyes and do the right thing. Skate to where the puck is going. Don't get to a year from now. Look back and say, oh, are we going to say we were shocked? What happened? No. We're going to say, what the heck were we thinking falling into the trap they laid for us? You got the future of America First standing right here. I'm asking you to do the right thing for this country. I'm asking for your vote on January 15th, next Monday night. 30 minutes of your time to save this country and to bring as many people in this community out as you can. Because the future of our country and the existence of our country depends on it. We are in the middle of a war between those of us who love the United States of America and this fringe minority who hates our country and what we stand for. Between the permanent state and the everyday citizen, between the Great Reset and the Great Uprising. That's what's at stake in this country right now. And so I'm asking you to do the right thing. And if you all do your part on that day, if I win the Iowa caucus, I'm your next president. If I'm your next president, we shut down the deep state and get this country back. If you all do your part, I promise you, Apurva and I and our family, we will stop at nothing to do ours to make sure, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, make sure that our country's best days are actually still ahead of us. Thank you guys for coming out today. God bless you and your families in our United States of America. We can open this up for some more questions. Whenever they drag me out, I'm going to leave, but I want to stay with you all as long as we can, and Apurva's going to stay till the very end as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm 18, and if it's not the worst time in history to buy a house, it's very close to that.
It's tough.
And one of the things that I love that you talk about is foreign investments, especially in China. And I think one of the big thing we have here is Chinese investors coming in,
propping up the prices.
Farmland,
BlackRock,
and housing. One of the things is, I know you're against that, but we should also be in mind of the companies that are here. And what's your plan to reallocate those houses that are bought up by Chinese investors and actually allocate them to single families than not big companies that would just use them?
Well, there's something going on. BlackRock's bidding up the price of homes. China's bidding up the price of homes. But there's something deeper going on as well that we could fix. I'm dealing with that as a national security matter. I don't want your generation or our children to grow up and be a bunch of Chinese serfs, which is where we're headed 50 to 100 years from now. They make our F-35 jets. They make the pharmaceuticals we put in our mouth. They make the shoes on our feet, the phones in our pockets, and now they're buying our land, donating to our universities, determining how our children are educated. What's next? Lobbying our government. They're already doing it. Co-opting our companies as pawns to do more lobbying of that same government. This is where this road ends. That's the longer plot we're falling for. It's a short-term plot in the next couple of months. Between now and the spring, I told you about what's happening in this election. Fast forward to the next 10 years, this is the way it's playing out in our relationship with China. So that's the deeper issue that has implications for housing, but it goes to the future existence of this country. As it relates to housing, there's also I hesitate to call it an easy fix, but I think it is, actually. There are a number of regulations that have constrained the supply of housing. It's the product of lobbying for people who already owned a lot of that property. BlackRock and others. There are what you call land use restrictions at the local level and federal regulations from the EPA and otherwise in recent years that have massively constrained the supply of housing, especially single, smaller plots that young people want or would want more before they have children or otherwise a smaller home. So there's a whole constraint on the supply of housing, and especially on the supply of smaller houses on smaller plots. And it's the laws of supply and demand. You constrict the supply, prices go up, shrinks the economy. How do you unwind that? Do the opposite. Strip out those land use restrictions, strip out all of those regulations. That increases the supply of housing. And that's how you bring down the cost of housing, and that's how you grow this economy. There's two obligations I have to your generation. Grow the economy. You can do that through stripping back a lot of these regulations, and do it in a way that relieves us of our national debt. You have about $200,000. I'm sorry, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you have about $200,000 in national debt on your shoulders that you didn't sign up for, all the while you can't even afford to buy a house. And that's not your fault. That's the fault of the people who came before you, who failed to do anything about it. What I want to do is address that national debt problem while also growing our economy. How do you do that? Well, first of all, increase the supply of everything: housing, energy. Same constraints on the energy sector: drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear energy. That grows the economy, brings prices down. Get the oil and gas out from underneath our ground and sell it. Use that to buy down about $8 trillion of our national debt. The next $7 trillion from 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that didn't advance our interest. Don't repeat those mistakes in Ukraine or elsewhere. That's $15 trillion right there. Then you slash and burn 75% of the federal bureaucracy. You got our national debt problem right there under control while growing our economy and bringing down the cost of energy and housing. That's the first obligation I owe you. And the second one's already embedded in that. Making sure you don't have $200,000 in national debt on your shoulders, and making sure you don't have somebody else's gun over your shoulder in somebody else's trench fighting somebody else's war. The people who will serve this country when I'm the commander-in-chief, I have a responsibility to them and their families and to this country to make sure they're used to exclusively protect Americans and American interests, starting right here in our own homeland. If we do those two things, I think those could be the most valuable promises I could make to the next generation. And as your next president, I owe that to you. I'm part of a generation that grew up into a lot of the mistakes that were made that your generation is now going to bear. And it's my obligation as your next president to actually make sure that we fix it. Thank you, man. I appreciate the question. Thank you. Anyone?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, yeah.
You can probably hear me anyway. Are you familiar with Dr. Robert Epstein? He just testified to Congress fairly recently. And his
What was his recent testimony on?
Google and how they have shaped elections, especially
They're doing it right now.
8 to 10
They're
years.
doing it literally right
fine.
now, like today. I'll give you an update on this, yeah.
So my question is, with everything that we know and like how people are just losing faith and they know this kind of stuff, and it's like, oh, well, Google's controlling our elections, so what are we going to do? So my question is, what would your first step be to deal with something like Google?
Yeah. I'll tell you, even in the last 24 hours at the event after the event last night, they showed me a guy who was with me yesterday, did an interview, snowy Des Moines, we did an interview outside. He was a young podcaster. He was very young, I forget. You know, he's been successful, whatever. I don't remember his name, but he's well known in that YouTuber world. For some reason, and I don't think I said anything particularly controversial in that, he got what was called, they didn't just take it down, he got a permanent ban on YouTube. The election interference has already begun in this election. They tipped the scales of that last election. Suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. This time they're going to stop at nothing. So much of what's happening, though, is they're taking their instructions from the deep state. Because the federal regulatory state's a threat to Google if it goes in the wrong direction. Remember, the threats, it's a long story. It's all my book, Woke Inc., the first one that I wrote. But I'll give you the short version here. The threats to tech used to come from the left, actually. Right? Break up big tech was a left-wing slogan, and much of the federal bureaucracy was trying to do it. So the deal they made is, okay, just give us the instructions through the back door. We'll do your bidding. We'll do what you need us to do that you can't do directly because the government has its hands tied in a way that Google doesn't. The government's a state actor. It's bound by the First Amendment. So the Googles of the world say, hey, we'll do your dirty work for you, but leave us the heck alone because we can actually do that even more effectively than you can. That's when the left turned the other way, and then break up big tech just dissolved along with it. So number one, what I'm going to do as the next president is any bureaucrat who's pressuring a private company like Google or Facebook or BlackRock or whatever, or a bank, to do something through the back door that the government couldn't do through the front door. It's illegal behavior. We're going to expose it. Elon did it for Twitter. He published the Twitter files. We're going to publish the state action files across the entire bureaucracy and the entire economy. To solve a problem, you got to see it first. And then we're going to hold the lawbreakers accountable. And if it is state action in disguise, that's what that is. It's not the action of a private company. It's state action in disguise. Then the Constitution still applies. Those companies are still then, if they enjoy Section 230 immunity, which comes from the federal government to do this kind of thing, then they're bound by the same constraints as the federal government, including the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That's how I'm going to deal with it. This is a third rail issue for me because the media is itself failing to hold the government accountable, the mainstream media. But who holds the mainstream media accountable? The last bastion we have is a free and open internet. Once we get that, we're done. And I'm the president. If you want one presidential candidate in either party who's actually going to defend our principles of free speech and open expression, it's me. I'm not, even others. I mean, there's views I disagree with. I'll tell you, the event I came to here, from here, you left right as this was happening. There's people who barged in. They had climate views. There was a police officer coming to take her out. I said, don't do that. We'll give her the mic. But we had a deal. She's going to be respectful of everybody else. She gets 60 seconds. But she gets to be heard. So I'll practice what I preach. It's not just because they're censoring conservatives today. It could be liberals tomorrow. It doesn't matter. We're not a country where we use the weaponization of technology to silence our political opponents. And that's how I'm going to lead the country on principle as your next president. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'll take one more, and then can Apurva stay a little longer, too? Apurva can stay a little longer, and then I'll head off.
Recent administrations, the power of the presidency comes through executive order.
Yeah. That ends on my watch.
How do you end that cycle of that?
So we got to draw this distinction here between properly exercising executive authority through executive action, running the executive branch. I'm actually going to be a stronger leader than we've had in a very long time. We've had very weak leaders when it comes to running the executive branch generally. So that means firing employees. You get to do that as the chief executive. If somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without authority to change it. There's one executive branch. Article 2 says the executive power of the United States shall be vested in a president, not in multiple different agencies or multiple different executive branches, one. So in some ways, and this is where the New York Times writers or whatever will mischaracterize. There's a headline, Vivek Ramaswamy will rule by fiat. No, you guys misunderstand the Constitution. I'll run the executive branch, which is my duty if I'm swearing an oath to the Constitution and keeping it. Shutting down agencies. Congress has already given the president, in certain circumstances, the ability to shut down agencies that Congress created if it promotes the economy or is a redundant agency. The Presidential Reorganization Act in 1977 gives that to us. But I will end the use of executive orders and rescind any that were passed, that were a substitute for lawmaking, setting policy for the country. That should not be done through executive action. And so it's a great question. And in the media's distillation of me, they'll I think like the caricatured view you would hear is that I'm like an executive order guy. I'm actually not. Executive order, I'm actually the opposite of that. I've said I would rescind all of the executive orders, not just from the president, but I effectively consider most regulations coming from three-letter agencies to have the legal status of an unconstitutional executive order, actually. Because Congress never gave the agencies the power any more than they gave it to the president, but somehow everybody's all worked up when the president does it, when most of them come from the other agencies, and it's wrong in both directions. So I'm going to rescind all of those. But doing that isn't the use of inappropriate executive action. It's fixing the failure to actually legislate through Congress as the Founding Fathers envisioned. So I hope that's clear. Firing bureaucrats, yes, I'm going to do more of it. And I'm going to do it without asking anybody for permission, because that's what it means to be a chief executive. But setting policy, creating affirmative action through the back door. That's what Lyndon Johnson did. And we still have it on the books. Executive Order 11246. I pushed Trump's people on why they didn't rescind it. They said, it's not a political hill we want to die on. You'll drag my dead body out of the White House before we rescind executive orders like that one that have torn this country to a breaking point. And I'll say this before heading out is, I think it's going to take a president who both has sharp elbows, can break things as an outsider. We hadn't had that in a long time. Donald Trump brought that. I respect the hell out of him for it. I bring that on steroids, to be honest with you. And that's good. But you also need a president. I believe we need a president. We deserve a president who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution in this country. And those two things don't usually go together, right? You'll have the academic legal types here. You'll have the guys with a little bit of brawn over here to break things. And both are important, but you need both things in the president. That's what pulled me into this race, actually. And in a deeper sense, it's our faith that pulls us into this race, because our faith teaches us that God puts us here for a purpose. Every one of us has our own unique God-given gifts. Every one of us does. It's our duty to use those gifts to do what is right in the short time we're given. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. That's why we're doing what we're doing right now. I promise you it's not out of convenience with our 3.5-year-old and our soon-to-be 4-year-old, our 1.5-year-old, poor of a hero in her own right, saving lives every day. One of the best at what she does. Patients are able to swallow food as cancer survivors who haven't swallowed food for years because of what she does. We have such a broken healthcare system. It's actually a sick care system. So bad that in some of those cases, she doesn't even get paid for the work that she does. She's doing this with me. We're doing this together because this is about saving the life of our country. That's why we're in this. And if somebody else could do this job, we'd be the happier for it. But I'm in this race because I believe this has to be us. God puts each of us here for a purpose, and we have to use those God-given gifts to do what is right. And so I'm going to do my part. It's not going to be just some president coming from on high to save us from the White House. It doesn't work that way. If we're going to be saved, it is going to be because we save ourselves. Not in the spiritual realm, but in this one, in our civic realm. That's going to be how it works. And so that's why I'm asking for your help. This system isn't made for people like us to do this. It's not. I mean, the mainstream media wants me sidelined. They don't want you to hear what I have to say. We're doing Tim Pool tonight. We're going to get more viewers through that than through the fake CNN debate they're hosting tonight. Pathetic nonsense. It's amazing, actually, how rigged it is. There's the RNC debates. Certain of the polls, they just don't count. Morning Consult, one of the best ones, largest. No, it didn't count. 48 hours after I did the CNN town hall here in Iowa, where they cut off early after I talked about the truth of what happened on January 6th, which does look like it was in part the product of government entrapment. They cut it off 5 minutes early, bring a bunch of experts to say how that was dangerous misinformation. 48 hours later, we get a call saying that certain of the polls that the Republican National Committee used won't be counted, which are exactly the ones that would be used to qualify me. That's the game that's being played. Not just in the media, but in the Republican establishment. Otherwise, Ronna McDaniel doesn't like that I called for her to resign. She said, I won't get another cent of funding from the RNC. That's fine. I still stand by my statement. I'd rather speak the truth and lose an election than to win by playing some fake game of political snakes and ladders. I mean, that's the kind of president we deserve, I think. But that's not my choice. That's your choice. And so that's why we're asking for your help. I'm asking you for your vote on January 15th. I'm asking you to tell everybody you know in this community who cares about this country and are patriots who believe in the importance of our country to do the same thing. And if you all do your part, we're going to do ours, and we will stop at nothing as a family to get this done. And I believe that our best days can actually still be ahead of us. That's what George Washington would say if you were here today. And that's what I'll tell you when we take office about a year from now as your next president. Thank you guys for coming out, and I appreciate it. We'll take a few more questions, but I think, Esther, I think that might be my cue. Upward.
The future president of the United States of America. Let's give him a round of
Thank you.
applause.
I appreciate it. You can stay and talk to people for a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you have one more question, sir, we could probably take it. Yep. Yeah, let's get some pictures. Come in. We have a few minutes. Let's take a pictures before we head out. Thank you, guys, for the welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, tell me.
So that really,
Come on up, sir, while we're doing. Yeah.
I'm an educator,
Yeah.
and I feel like in my 20 years or whatever,
Yeah.
that a lot of decisions that have been made with
Yeah.
education are made by like politicians. A lot of decisions about education that have been made
Yeah.
have been made by politicians who are not educators, or not in like the front lines of education.
Yes.
And so I guess when you say like
Educators should
Department
be-
of Education will be gone, like, or whatever, like I guess I want to be ensured that educators will be part, or
Yes.
people who are in education. It's just like decisions are always being made by people who have no idea what's even happening. And the people, just because you went to school, doesn't mean you have any idea about the way that schools are run or the things that need to be done or how to teach. When you say that, can you explain more about?
Thank you. I just want to address, it's a great question, just a philosophy. As it applies to education, so it applies across the board. I met with a bunch of truckers. We've released trucking policy. One of the pledges I've made is the person who leads the lead regulator in the Department of Transportation that sets the rules for truckers or broker transparency or otherwise has never been somebody who sat behind the wheel. It was always somebody who sat behind a desk. Well, just as that should be the case for trucking industry, just as it should be the case in every other part of the government, I think that, yes, those who set education policy should be the people who know, also include the first thing about education. I just think it shouldn't be done by a central federalized bureaucracy, but much of that needs to be led at the state and local level. You have my word that the people who will advise us on the way we do that will be people who actually at that state and local level deserve to actually have that view heard as we implement it. It'll be a farmer in charge of the Department of Agriculture. It'll be somebody who's sat behind the wheel for any regulatory agency setting trucker policy. And you have my word that people like yourself on the front lines of actually educating the next generation of Americans will make sure that we have sense applied in the way that we actually decentralize the funding of education in this country. Thank you. I appreciate you being here, and thank you for what you do every day. We'll take pictures, and then come on up and we'll answer questions as we're able to as we leave. Thank you for welcoming us, guys.
Folks, if we can, let's do the pictures.
You can be in it too. A few minutes, right?
Take a look at me.
Oh, really?
So if you'll just stay
Thank
put
you.
if you'd like to get a picture.
1, 2, 3. There we
Thank
go.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. I think they're dragging me out of here,
Yeah.
apparently. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
Hey, man. Thanks for the question.